3,000 years ago, on the wind-swept plains of western Anatolia, a war was fought that would never truly end. Armies clashed beneath the walls of a great city, heroes fell and gods descended, and out of that chaos came the oldest and most powerful work of literature in the Western world. The Iliad, attributed to the blind poet Homer, is not just a story about a war, it is a story about what war does to human beings, to the men who fight it, to the families who wait, and to the gods who watch from above. In just 24 books, Homer gave Western civilization its first heroes, its first villains, its first meditation on glory and grief, on pride and mortality, on what it means to be a human being who knows they are going to die. What makes the Iliad extraordinary is not its battles, though they are among the most vivid ever written. What makes it extraordinary is its humanity. Achilles, the greatest warrior who ever lived, is also a sulking, grieving, heartbroken man. Hector, the champion of Troy, is also a husband and a father who holds his infant son and knows he will not survive the war. These are not cardboard figures of myth. They are recognizable human beings in impossible circumstances. Today, we will walk through the Iliad from beginning to end, its world, its heroes, its gods, its battles, its grief, and its legacy. By the end of this video, you will understand why, 28 centuries after it was first sung aloud, the Iliad is still considered one of the greatest works of art ever created by a human mind. Welcome to the story of the Trojan War. Welcome to the Iliad. Before we enter the story itself, we must ask a question that scholars have debated for over 2,000 years. Who was Homer, and did he actually exist? The ancient Greeks believed Homer was a blind poet from the island of Chios, or possibly Smyrna or Colophon, or one of several other cities that all claimed him, who composed the Iliad and the Odyssey sometime around the 8th century BCE. But here is the complication. The Trojan War, if it happened at all, took place around 1200 BCE, approximately 400 years before Homer supposedly lived. The stories Homer tells had already been circulating orally for 4 centuries before they were written down. This is what scholars call the oral tradition, the practice of composing, memorizing, and transmitting epic poetry aloud before writing, through performance. Singers called aoidoi would travel from court to court, reciting stories of heroes and gods, improvising within a framework of stock phrases and standard scenes. The Iliad bears the unmistakable fingerprints of oral composition, its famous repeated epithets: swift-footed Achilles, grey-eyed Athena, rosy-fingered Dawn, are not mere decoration, but mnemonic tools, formulaic phrases that helped a singer maintain the meter while giving his memory a moment to plan what came next. Whether Homer was a single genius who shaped the tradition into its final form, a committee of poets working over generations, or something in between, is still debated. The scholar Milman Parry in the 1920s revolutionized Homeric studies by demonstrating the formulaic nature of Homeric verse by comparing it to living oral traditions in Yugoslavia. What we can say with confidence is this: the Iliad, as we have it, is one of the most structurally sophisticated and emotionally profound works of narrative art ever created, whether by one mind or many over centuries. Whatever Homer was, man, myth, or tradition, the Iliad is his monument, and it has stood for nearly 3,000 years. To understand the Iliad, we must understand the world in which the Trojan War took place, the world of the Bronze Age, approximately 1200 BCE, when Mycenaean Greece was at the height of its power and the Eastern Mediterranean was a complex network of kingdoms, trade routes, and competing empires. Mycenaean Greece was not the Greece of the Parthenon and Socrates. That classical Greece would come 5 centuries later. This was an earlier, harder, more violent world of warrior kings who ruled from hilltop citadels, commanded fleets of oared warships, and measured their worth in gold, cattle, and bronze. The great Mycenaean centers, Mycenae itself, Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, were palace economies, where the king controlled the production and distribution of goods, where scribes tracked every jar of olive oil and every sheep with meticulous bureaucratic precision on clay tablets in Linear B script. Bronze was the defining technology of this age, and also its great limitation. Bronze weapons and armor gave warriors extraordinary protection and lethality, but bronze required both copper and tin, which had to be imported from distant sources, making military power inseparable from control of trade routes. The city of Troy, known to its inhabitants as Vilusa or Ilios, stood at the entrance to the Dardanelles, the narrow strait connecting the Aegean to the Black Sea. This was one of the most strategically valuable pieces of real estate in the ancient Mediterranean world, and control of it meant control of the lucrative Black Sea trade. Archaeologists have found at least 9 distinct layers of settlement at the site called Hisarlik in northwestern Turkey. Troy 7a, destroyed by fire around 1180 BCE, is the most likely candidate for the Troy of Homer. It shows signs of violent destruction and contains human remains indicating a violent end. The world Homer describes, the great bronze armor, the chariot warfare, the palace economies, the gift-giving culture of aristocratic warriors, matches remarkably well with what we know of the late Bronze Age, even though Homer himself lived centuries after these events. This was a world where honor was everything, where a man's worth was measured publicly in the gifts he received and the enemies he defeated, and where to die without glory was considered the worst fate imaginable. Every catastrophe needs a beginning, and the Trojan War's beginning is one of the most extraordinary origin stories in all of literature. A story that starts not with armies or kings, but with a wedding, a golden apple, and the vanity of gods. At the wedding of the sea nymph Thetis to the mortal Peleus, the event that would produce Achilles himself, all the gods were invited except one, Eris, the goddess of discord. Furious at being excluded, Eris threw a golden apple into the banquet inscribed with the words, "For the fairest." 3 goddesses immediately claimed the apple: Hera, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; and Aphrodite, goddess of love. Unable to settle the dispute themselves, the gods appointed a mortal judge, Paris, the handsome young prince of Troy. Each goddess offered Paris a bribe. Hera offered him power over kingdoms. Athena offered him wisdom and skill in battle. Aphrodite offered him the most beautiful woman in the world as his wife. Paris chose Aphrodite's gift, and his choice would bring ruin to Troy. The most beautiful woman in the world was Helen, wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. When Paris arrived in Sparta as a guest of Menelaus, he and Helen either fell in love or Paris abducted her. Ancient sources disagree on which, and they sailed together to Troy, taking much of Sparta's treasure with them. This was the ultimate violation of xenia, the sacred Greek concept of guest friendship, the obligation of both host and guest to treat each other with honor and generosity. Paris had accepted Menelaus's hospitality and then stolen his wife. This could not go unanswered. Menelaus called upon his brother Agamemnon, the most powerful king in Greece, who assembled the greatest coalition of Greek warriors ever gathered. 1,186 ships crossed the Aegean to demand Helen's return. Troy refused, and so the war began. A 10-year war over a stolen woman, or over trade routes, or over honor, or over all 3 at once. The Iliad does not cover the full 10 years. It covers 51 days in the war's 10th and final year, when the decisive crisis finally arrived. The Greeks who sailed to Troy were not a unified nation, but a coalition of warrior kings, each commanding his own ships and soldiers, each with his own personality, his own ambitions, and his own fatal flaws. And understanding them is essential to understanding the Iliad. At the head of the expedition was Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, called the King of Men, the most powerful but not the most admirable of the Greek leaders. Agamemnon is authoritative and strategically shrewd, but also arrogant, willing to sacrifice everything and everyone, including his own daughter, Iphigenia, for the glory of victory. Achilles is the Iliad's central figure, the greatest warrior in the Greek army, possibly the greatest warrior who has ever lived, swift-footed and terrifying in battle, able to kill with a single throw of his ash-wood spear. But Achilles comes with a condition. His mother Thetis, a sea goddess, told him he had two choices: a long, quiet life of obscurity, or a short, glorious life that would make his name immortal. He chose glory. Achilles is also deeply human in his vulnerability. He loves his companion Patroclus with a devotion that is the emotional heart of the entire poem. He burns with a sense of honor that cannot tolerate being disrespected, and he struggles with the knowledge that his extraordinary gifts come with an expiration date. Odysseus, the man of many devices, as Homer calls him, is perhaps the most interesting Greek strategist. Where Achilles is pure force, Odysseus is pure intelligence, cunning, persuasive, always planning 3 moves ahead. He is the one who devises the Trojan horse that eventually ends the war, though that event falls outside the Iliad itself. Ajax the Great is the second best fighter in the Greek army after Achilles. Huge, slow, immovable, the defender who holds the line when everyone else is retreating, described as a wall for the Achaeans. He lacks the brilliance of Achilles or the cunning of Odysseus, but possesses a raw courage that never wavers. Diomedes, young king of Argos, arguably has the best single day in the entire poem. In Book 5, he goes on a rampage so intense that he wounds not just Trojan warriors, but 2 Olympian gods, Aphrodite and Ares himself, in the same afternoon. Each of these heroes embodies a different aspect of the Greek heroic ideal. Achilles represents absolute excellence. Agamemnon represents power. Odysseus represents intellect. Ajax represents steadfast loyalty. And Diomedes represents youthful, fearless aggression.